Have you ever felt like you keep spending, but nothing you buy really brings lasting meaning? That each new purchase gives you a fleeting moment of joy, only to be followed by that same familiar emptiness? If that sounds familiar, I invite you to pause for just a moment, take a deep breath, because what you're about to hear might just change the way you think about money and happiness. In a world that constantly encourages us to consume as a way to fill emotional gaps, financial freedom and inner peace can feel increasingly out of reach. But there is another way, a quieter, gentler, and deeply intentional path that has long existed in Japanese culture. Japanese minimalism isn't just about owning less, it's about living with intention. During my 30-day journey of not shopping, inspired by the principles of Japanese minimalism, I discovered more than I ever expected, from untangling unconscious spending habits, healing my relationship with money, to finding peace in the simplest of things. This wasn't just a personal challenge, it was a return to inner abundance. If you've ever longed for a lighter life, a clearer mind, and a healthier relationship with material things, then this video is for you. Today, I'm sharing the full story, everything I experienced, learned, and the practical strategies you can use to begin your own journey, starting right now. Because sometimes, freedom doesn't come from having more, it comes from having the courage to live with less. 1. The philosophy of Japanese minimalism in spending. Something strange happens when you stop shopping. Not a sense of lacking, but an overwhelming sense of excess. Excess time, excess thoughts, and an excess of questions so simple yet profound, like, what do I really need to live well? That single question led me to a beautiful philosophy from Japan, where simplicity isn't about having less, it's about knowing what's enough. Japanese minimalism in spending isn't about cutting back or living in deprivation. It's a spiritual journey, an attitude toward life deeply rooted in culture, Zen Buddhism, and quiet practicality. In a world where happiness is often tied to more money, more stuff, more experiences, Japanese minimalism gently offers a counterpoint. Less, but deeper. Less clutter, more clarity. Less impulse, more intention. And perhaps most importantly, a deeper awareness of how and why we spend. My own journey into this philosophy began with 4 foundational concepts: Chisoku, Kakeibo, Matanai, and Danshari. Each one felt like a mirror, reflecting how I had been approaching money, desire, and even myself. Let's begin with Chisoku, a word that feels like an exhale after a long day. Chisoku is a small word, but understanding it brings a sense of deep calm. It means knowing sufficiency, a concept rooted in Buddhist and Taoist teachings, where peace doesn't come from gaining more, but from shedding the endless hunger for more. I used to think I needed a new outfit for every meeting, a new pair of shoes for the weekend, a new book to feel like I was growing. But when I started living with the spirit of Chisoku, I began asking myself, do I really need this? Or am I just trying to fill a void? Those questions, though simple, had the power to unravel so many of my old spending habits. What I felt most clearly while practicing Chisoku was a deepening sense of gratitude, an old but reliable pair of shoes, a simple home-cooked meal, an afternoon spent rereading a favorite book. None of it was flashy, but somehow, all of it was enough. And that shift from always wanting more to truly appreciating what I already had quietly transformed how I related to money. I found myself shopping less, but not because I was forcing it. I simply didn't feel the need anymore. The urge to scroll through online stores when I felt bored or empty faded. I stopped thinking I needed something new to feel better. From a quiet place inside, Chisoku began reshaping my habits, not by restriction, but by calm awareness. Next, I found myself drawn into a different space where numbers carried emotion, and writing them down became a form of healing. That space was Kakeibo. Kakeibo isn't an app or a spreadsheet. It's a notebook, simple, humble, but capable of changing how you see money. Created in 1904 by a Japanese woman named Hani Motoko, Kakeibo isn't just about managing finances. It's about understanding yourself. I remember the first time I sat down and started writing down my income and expenses. It felt odd, almost too personal. But as I recorded things like groceries, rent, or a cup of coffee, I realized each number had a story. and those stories told me more about who I was than any Instagram highlight ever could. What makes Kakeibo powerful is the act of handwriting. When I wrote, "Dinner out 50 USD, I wasn't just logging the amount, I was also recalling how I felt that evening. Was I eating out because I was happy? Bored? Lonely? Kakeibo became a gentle mirror, helping me notice emotional triggers I had never paused to examine. There was no judgment, no guilt, just awareness. A quiet kind of honesty with myself. The more I wrote, the more I noticed patterns money spent from habit, from peer pressure, from fear of missing out. But once I could see those patterns, I could change them. Not with strict rules, but with mindful choices. That, I think, is the real gift of Kakeibo. It doesn't tell you to spend less, it teaches you to see more clearly. And when you see clearly, you begin to save naturally, not by cutting yourself off, but by aligning your spending with what truly matters. From writing, I moved into a different kind of consciousness, one rooted in reverence. Reverence for the objects we use, the food we eat, and the resources we so often take for granted. That's where I met Matanai. Matanai isn't just about not wasting, it's a kind of spiritual sigh, a sense of deep regret for letting something go to waste. Whether it's a single-use plastic fork, a half-eaten meal, or a still-good shirt tossed out, Matanai asks us to remember, everything carries a piece of effort, time, and life. Living with the spirit of Matanai changed the way I looked at everything. Could I reuse that takeout container? Could I fix that wobbly chair instead of tossing it? Could I finish what I already had in the fridge before buying more? I started treating my kitchen with care, buying only what I'd use, cooking just enough, saving leftovers intentionally. I began mending clothes, cleaning my shoes, appreciating old furniture like old friends. And surprisingly, this didn't feel restrictive. It felt empowering, like I was reclaiming a kind of quiet dignity in my choices. Matanai taught me to see the sacred in the everyday, to look at things not just for their utility, but for the life behind them. A t-shirt isn't just cotton, it's labor, energy, water, transportation. When I stopped wasting, I also stopped overspending. I didn't need more, I just needed to care more. And at last, when I had quieted the noise of constant wanting, I arrived at the most liberating principle of all, Danshari. Danshari is a journey of letting go not to be empty, but to return to yourself. It's composed of 3 steps: Dan, refuse; Sha, discard; and Ri, separate. Each is a small action, but together they're a powerful cleansing of your external and internal life. I used to hold on to so many things, just in case. Extra gadgets, duplicate tools, souvenirs I didn't even like. But Danshari gently asked me, are you keeping this out of fear, or because it brings real value? I began to say no to free samples, to junk mail, to things I didn't truly need. I started removing 1 item each day, no pressure, just a slow shedding of layers. The hardest part wasn't the physical stuff. It was the emotions, the stories tied to those things. But little by little, as I let go, I felt lighter, freer, like I could finally hear my own voice again. Danshari helped me realize, when my life wasn't packed to the brim with stuff, I could actually breathe. I could feel joy in space, in silence, in simply being. 2. Psychological and spiritual benefits. The very first thing I felt, perhaps the most profound, was the easing of financial pressure. In a time when every bill feels like a gust of wind that threatens your peace, money worries become a kind of background noise we learn to live with. I used to feel anxious about unexpected costs, guilty after swiping my card too freely. But through these 30 days of not spending, I discovered something powerful. Some forms of stress only exist because of how we choose to live. As I stopped spending, I also started listening to the emotions tied to money. I felt relief when I didn't have to brace myself for the credit card statement at the end of the month. I felt peace in not having to decide between 5 must-have items in my cart, and I realized that by simply desiring less, I had created a greater sense of security within. In Japan, people don't spend a lot, but they know how to enjoy. They find joy in low-cost moments, a walk in the park, a free summer festival, a cup of tea shared with a friend. They treat saving not as sacrifice, but as a way of honoring their dignity and freedom. I didn't learn this from reading books. I learned it from the quiet shifts inside me throughout this challenge. The second gift, one I didn't expect, was the quiet blooming of gratitude. When I stopped bringing new things in, I began to truly see what I already had. My old jacket still held its shape. My favorite mug had no chips. My phone worked perfectly fine, so why had I been wanting to replace it? Cutting back on spending felt like lifting a fog of habit. I could finally see clearly what was essential and what had just been noise. With no new purchases to chase, I suddenly had more mental and emotional space to notice and appreciate what had always been there, quietly serving me. I started writing down my thoughts, the moments when I wanted to buy something and chose not to. Not as a form of control, but as a way to understand myself better. Every time I paused, I learned something new. Why did I want this? Was it coming from true need or just a fleeting feeling? As my sense of gratitude grew, I began to feel a new relationship forming with money. It was no longer something that defined me or others. It became a tool, a quiet current of energy that deserved mindful direction. Japanese families teach financial mindfulness from a young age with piggy banks, comparison shopping, small chores exchanged for allowance. They treat money awareness like planting seeds. The earlier, the deeper the roots. I started defining my own money values not to restrict myself, but to guide myself. I wanted to spend in ways that aligned with my values. I wanted to choose experiences over possessions, depth over status, intention over impulse. And then I noticed something else. Without the constant tug of instant gratification, I felt stronger. Self-discipline no longer felt like deprivation. It became a form of freedom. I began practicing the 24-hour rule before buying anything non-essential. I'd visualize using that saved money for something truly meaningful like a trip or a course that would enrich my life. I observed the urge to buy something, but didn't always act on it. Just pausing, even briefly, gave me the power to choose differently. This kind of restraint wasn't cold or harsh. Quite the opposite, it gave me back a sense of quiet self-respect. I was no longer reacting to every ad, every post, every fleeting desire. I stopped chasing dopamine hits with every add to cart, and in return, I found myself spending less but living more deeply. After 30 days without shopping, I didn't just feel lighter in my wallet. I felt lighter in my spirit. Less fear, less comparison, less noise. In its place, more clarity, more calm, and a sense that I was finally living in alignment with what truly matters to me. 3. Japanese minimalism strategies in spending. They weren't rules. They felt more like quiet rituals, subtle anchors that helped me stay present and clear in a world overflowing with temptation. They weren't restrictive, but liberating. They didn't ask me to cut back, they invited me to live more intentionally. The first strategy, and perhaps the simplest, was the 24-hour rule. This principle is almost disarmingly gentle. Before buying anything non-essential, pause. Wait 24 hours. That's it. No rushing, no impulsive swiping. No chasing the thrill of buy now. And yet, it's precisely this pause that holds such quiet power. When I started applying this rule, I realized that most of the things I thought I had to have didn't matter to me after a day. The excitement faded, the urgency softened. That desire, which had felt so convincing in the moment, turned out to be little more than a fleeting emotional wave. Even though this rule didn't originate in Japan, it fits beautifully within the spirit of Kakeibo, where every expense is reflected on, written down, and faced with honesty. It also echoes the essence of Zen, the art of slowing down, breathing, and observing. I started writing down the things I wanted to buy, then letting them sit. That small act, so simple, helped me avoid countless unnecessary purchases. And in those moments of waiting, I found myself asking deeper questions. Will this truly bring me lasting happiness, or am I just trying to fill a temporary void? More often than not, the answer became clear. I didn't need it. From pausing, I moved toward a more active practice, something that asked me not just to wait, but to choose, and that was the one in, one out rule. In the past, I would add without ever subtracting, but this principle gently reminded me, if I want my space and my life to remain light and uncluttered, then every new item must come with the conscious decision to let something go. Nothing enters without something else exiting. It's not just about stuff. It's about balance. This shift changed the way I approached purchases. Every new item now required a quiet trade. What am I willing to release in exchange for this? It made me more selective. It made me more aware. It made every new addition feel like a meaningful choice, not a mindless grab. And strangely, it deepened my appreciation. Because now, each item had to earn its place. It had to be worthy of the space it occupied and the energy it required. This principle echoes the heart of Danshari, where letting go isn't about discarding, but about spiritual cleansing. One in, one out brings that idea to daily life. It keeps things flowing. It prevents stagnation. It creates room for clarity. From this intentional choosing, I naturally found myself drawn to another powerful shift, valuing quality over quantity. In Japan, there's a beautiful concept called shokunen katagi, the craftsman's spirit. It honors the quiet excellence of skilled work, where every item is made with care, purpose, and longevity in mind. When I began spending less, I also began paying more attention to what I was spending on. A well-made coat, though more expensive, would last me 5 winters. A sturdy pair of shoes, though less trendy, would carry me farther literally and metaphorically. I started looking closely at fabric, stitching, origin. I lost interest in fast fashion and throwaway culture. I wanted to own things that had soul, things I'd feel proud to use, things I'd want to maintain and cherish. Motenai was present in every decision. Because when I chose something durable, I also reduced waste. And wabi-sabi, appreciating beauty in aging, in imperfection, in the passage of time, taught me to love the things I already had, even as they wore with use and memory. But perhaps the most transformative of all was this: mindful consumption. Mindful consumption isn't just about saving money. It's about spending with awareness. It's about being fully present in every financial decision. Every purchase became a question of values. Do I truly need this? What impact does it have? Was it made with care, with ethics, with kindness? I started researching brands more carefully. I chose secondhand over new. I borrowed instead of bought. I saw each dollar I spent as a vote, a signal of what I wanted to support in the world. And I felt lighter, not because I was cutting costs, but because I was living more truthfully. Mindful consumption helped me slow down in a world that never stops. It connected me back to nature, to community, and to myself. In those quiet, thoughtful decisions about what to buy or not buy, I felt myself stepping into a new kind of life, deeper, calmer, and more aligned with who I truly wanted to be. 4. The philosophy of wabi-sabi in spending. Wabi-sabi doesn't try to fix flaws to achieve perfection. Instead, it invites us to embrace cracks, wear, and asymmetry as part of life's quiet poetry. And the moment we begin to see through this lens, the way we spend money begins to shift gently but fundamentally. Wabi-sabi taught me that perfection is an illusion, a product of advertising, social media, and pressure to always upgrade. But behind that glossy perfection lies a constant fatigue. Wabi-sabi whispers a different truth. The scratch on an old shoe is a memory. The crack in a tea bowl is evidence of life. The fading color of a shirt is a story told by time. I began to look at my belongings differently, not to see what needed replacing, but to see what was already full of meaning. A worn wooden table, a lamp slightly yellowed with age. I no longer felt embarrassed by old things. I started to feel grateful. And then I noticed I no longer craved new purchases. I wasn't drawn to the artificial perfection of brand new things. I started finding value in secondhand goods, in old books, in items that bore the marks of time. And naturally, I spent less but felt fuller. When I stopped chasing perfection, I began to rediscover the beauty of simplicity. Nothing fancy, nothing optimized, just enough and peaceful. Wabi-sabi treasures the plain and unpolished. It finds elegance in raw materials, wood, stone, clay. It admires the quiet charm of an uncluttered kitchen, the stillness of a space not overfilled. And I realized, when my surroundings became simpler, my thoughts grew quieter too. When my eyes weren't overwhelmed by clutter, my mind had space to breathe. I stopped wanting to buy things just for fun. I stopped piling on clothes that would end up forgotten. I realized simplicity isn't lacking. It's just the right amount to allow you to breathe. From that simplicity, something even deeper began to emerge, valuing spiritual richness over material value. Wabi-sabi doesn't care how many things you own. It cares about how you feel when you use them. A simple teapot can become a ritual of mindfulness every morning, a walk in the forest, a cup of tea with a loved one. These things don't fill your closet, but they fill your soul. I began spending more on experiences than objects. I saved money for travel, for learning, for moments that would live on in memory. And I realized no physical item could replace the peace of a morning in nature or the warmth of a long hug after a tiring day. Wabi-sabi also reminded me of impermanence, a concept the Japanese call mono no aware, the gentle sorrow of knowing everything passes. New things will eventually grow old, shiny will fade. But because it will pass, every moment, every experience, every object deserves to be lived and cherished fully. I started giving gifts of time, a homemade meal, a shared walk instead of shiny packages. I began saying no to things I didn't truly need, making space for what couldn't be bought. I looked again at how I spent, not just to see how much, but to understand what I was really living for. In the end, I realized wabi-sabi didn't just change the way I spent money, it changed how I saw life. Spending less wasn't about lack, it was about learning to live more deeply. To live without chasing, without perfecting, but with a deeper connection to what's real in the things we touch, in the experiences we share, and in the fleeting but beautiful moments that make up this life. 5. Practical application in daily life. If the previous 4 parts were about awakening the mind and transforming the inner world, then this part is where everything steps into real life, into each day, each choice, each tiny habit. And I want to share with you a journey that's both simple and incredibly powerful, the 30-day no-buy challenge. It might sound easy at first, but once you actually begin, you realize this isn't just about not spending money, it's about meeting yourself on a much deeper level. I started by preparing not just physically, by stocking up on food, toiletries, and essentials, but emotionally. I asked myself, what do I really hope to get out of this? What kind of relationship with money do I want to rebuild? I wrote down a clear intention not to force a result, but to stay grounded in meaning throughout the challenge. I set a few rules for myself. No new clothes, no ordering takeout, no new books. Only spending on true essentials like food, medicine, or fixing something important. I also let my friends know, not for pressure, but for quiet accountability. When others know, it gently reinforces your commitment not to them, but to yourself. The first few days weren't hard because I lacked anything. They were hard because I realized how often I'd use shopping to cope with feelings. Feeling empty, scroll through online stores, feeling bored, wander through the supermarket, feeling like I deserved a treat, buy something. When that option disappeared, I had no choice but to sit with the spaces inside me. I usually filled with stuff, and that's when something beautiful began to happen. I found other ways, free ways that were far more nourishing. I went to the local library and picked up books I never finished. I cooked with leftovers and half-used ingredients. I went for walks in the park and listened to the leaves rustle overhead. I learned to savor moments I used to miss because I was too busy looking for something new. I started keeping a daily journal, not just to track how much I saved, but to observe myself. Did I feel the urge to spend today? Why? How did it feel to resist? Each journal entry became a quiet conversation with my inner world. I began to see patterns, emotional triggers, vulnerable moments, habitual cravings, and with awareness came choice. I no longer felt swept away by impulse. I could pause, breathe, and choose something else. By the end of the first week, something shifted. I no longer thought about shopping the way I used to. Ads still popped up, but they didn't grip me like before. The inner calm that had replaced the fleeting high of a purchase felt steadier, more satisfying, and that gave me a real sense of freedom. When the 30 days ended, I didn't want to stop. I expanded it into smaller, more focused challenges. No new books for 3 months, no new furniture for half a year, no apps that encouraged unconscious spending. I tried digital minimalism, removing the apps that pushed me to spend without thinking. I slowed down not in a sluggish way, but in a way that felt grounded, intentional, and deeply alive. I started weaving in the philosophies I'd learned from Japanese minimalism. I practiced Chisoku to know that what I have is already enough. I lived with Matanai to waste nothing. Not food, not time, not energy. I embodied Danshari to continually release what no longer serves me. And I embraced wabi-sabi to find beauty even in the imperfect, the cracked, the incomplete parts of life. I didn't feel the need to call this minimalism. I just felt like I was living more honestly, more in rhythm with my real pace, more in tune with what brought me peace. And I realized something quiet and powerful. Not spending money can be an act of love. Not because I'm depriving myself, but because I'm finally learning how to treat myself and the world around me with more kindness, more clarity, and more care. If this video made you pause and reflect, I'd love for you to share your thoughts in the comments below. Type, "I choose to live gently," and tell me how the no-buy challenge or the spirit of wabi-sabi, chisoku, or danshari is showing up in your life. Thank you for being here, and for giving yourself permission to explore a slower, more intentional way of living. Remember, change doesn't have to be dramatic. Sometimes, it starts with just one small step, a conscious choice, a morning without spending, a quiet moment to check in with yourself. And maybe, that step begins right now. I truly hope we can keep walking this path of simplicity and healing together. See you in the next video.